Hey, welcome, Anita. Thank you so much on behalf of myself and my community for being here and giving us some of your precious time.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here chatting with you, Bernadette. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I know that a core foundation of your work is embodying love in a fear-based world. I'd like for us to talk about that today and talk about what that means and what that looks like, particularly as we all know the fear-based world has reared its ugly head significantly in the last 12 to 18 months. But also I've got some juicy questions to ask you from watching your videos over the last year, and I would love for your take on where you see us going as spiritual beings, and particularly for people that are on the path of awakening and consciousness, about how we operate given everything that's unfolded in a really practical and grounded way. And how do we be these things? How do we be love and unity in amongst divisiveness and such? So my first question is, or ask, is could you share a little about your revelations that you had from your own near-death experience? Because some people in my community will understand your body of work and some people it might be new to them.
Yes, of course. So I basically, I died from end stage cancer. I was in a coma because the cancer had progressed to the point where my organs shut down and it had metastasized throughout my lymphatic system. And I was in a coma and the doctors said I wasn't coming back. But in this coma, I actually was aware. I had left my body and I became aware of a greater reality. And I realized that as a spirit, as a soul, I continued to exist beyond the body. And in this state, I call it like a state of clarity, where I had this deep understanding as to my purpose and why I was here, why I had chosen to come into this life. But I also had this deep understanding of why I got sick in the first place. Like, why did I even get the cancer? Why did I get to that point of lying in that hospital bed, dying that day? And so and while I was in that state, that NDE or near-death experience state, I also reached a point where I felt as though I had a choice as to whether to come back into my body, into physical life, or to continue in that realm. In other words, to continue, and therefore my body would die and I wouldn't come back into my body. And of course, it was so beautiful on that side. I felt like I was just enveloped in this feeling of just unconditional love. And I was free. I was free from the pain and the fear of the disease, the fear of death, the fear of treatments. I had so much fear on this side. And the way the cancer had ravaged my body, I was in so much pain and discomfort. So no part of me wanted to come back into this physical body because it was just so beautiful. So of course I just wanted to stay there forever. But that in that state of clarity, it started to unfold that I had a purpose. I was also surrounded by beings who had passed on prior to my experience. Like my dad was there, who had died 10 years prior, and my best friend, and other beings that I didn't recognize. And it was as though they were there to help me and guide me. And it was as though they wanted me to know that it wasn't my time yet. And so they were encouraging me to come back. And I started to understand that now that I knew, not only now I knew what caused the illness, but now that I knew what my purpose was, and I also understood that we as beings are much more powerful than we've been led to believe, and we're not supposed to live in such fear as we've been doing. With all that clarity, I started to understand that if I chose to go back to my body would heal, and that I could complete the purpose that I came here to do. My husband was here, and I also understood that my purpose was linked to his, and if I didn't come back, he wouldn't be able to complete his purpose either. So I chose to come back into my body, and I'd been in the coma for about 36 hours. And after I came out of the coma, my body did heal very, very quickly. And the doctors and my family, they just couldn't believe what was going on, because the tumors just started to shrink within days. Within 4 or 5 days, the tumors had shrunk by about 60%. In about 5 weeks, they could find no trace of cancer in my body. And the doctors couldn't explain it. And I was released from the hospital to go home and live my life cancer-free. That was in 2006. And what I found is that in living my truth, in living the truth that I had learned on the other side, I found that so much of what I now knew and believed and learned from the other side went against everything that we are conditioned to believe here in this physical world. So it was like, so I realized that my battle, for want of a better word, wasn't over, because even though I was now healed and I was well, I felt like a fish out of water, because everything I believed in now was the complete opposite of what I had been ingrained or taught to believe as I was growing up. And it's the complete opposite of what everybody around me, in my culture, in this physical earthly paradigm, it's the complete opposite of what everybody in this earthly paradigm is conditioned to believe. And so it was like, wow, this is going to be a lonely road. And so I did lose quite a few friends. The only thing that kept me going was that Danny actually completely took to everything I was saying, because it was as if when I would talk about it, it was as if he was being reminded of something that he already knew. And because he was with me through the journey and he saw how fast I healed, he knew something had happened and he wanted to know everything that had happened on the other side. So it felt like we were making this journey together. Both of us got changed together. And that's the one saving grace I had, is that I don't know if I could have done it alone. I don't know, I don't know if I would have had what's the word for it? The will, or the desire to do it if I was doing it all alone. But it was because we were doing it together. And the journey has been incredible. It has had a lot of rewards and a lot of confirmations from the universe that I'm doing the right thing. So it's been quite a beautiful journey. It started out difficult, but it's been very beautiful.
Well, we're very grateful that you had the will and bless Danny, because I find great comfort in your experience. I think whether people are touched by illnesses and disease and cancer or not, the majority of human beings, I think most of us will agree, have an underlying, even if not recognized, fear of death. And your message, and I often send your book link to people when they raise that topic, because to hear someone share with us something that I think innately we know, but we want hard evidence, people. We want evidence. And you are so authentic and real. I just vibrationally, when you hear truth, you know truth. It's not a logical thing. It's like your cells go, yeah. And that's how your message, I think, is so comforting to so many people. So extremely grateful for that. And I really hear you about when you came back, you're swimming in the soup of the opposite of what you experienced. So it's quite, I imagine, confronting and would have been quite difficult to integrate and try to live a normal life after that experience. Yeah. So one of your phrases that I often read and hear is, we need to love ourselves like our lives depend on it. Yes. So can you just touch a little on this self-love, which for a lot of people feels like a theory and feels really hard for them to grasp, and how important that is for our health, well-being, life purpose, happiness, etc.?
Yes. So one of the biggest lessons I learnt on the other side was how important it is to love ourselves. And I had always been conditioned to believe that it's selfish to love myself. And so I never loved myself. I had always been conditioned to believe that it's egotistical to love yourself, and I'd been conditioned to believe that the ego is bad, and so on. And because of that, and also I grew up in a very gender biased culture where men were favored over women, and we were groomed to serve men and to be obedient to the men in our lives. And so I always made myself small. I never loved myself. I was always in service to others. And I didn't realize this, but I had dimmed my light so much and made myself so small to the point of being invisible that I had no idea that I had a spirit, a strong, beautiful spirit and soul inside me that was longing to express itself. It was longing to be somebody, to be out in this world, and it was longing to create and be and do. We all do. Every single one of us comes here as an expression of the source of God. And so when I say you have to love yourself, I'm not just saying like, oh, you have to go for massages or you have to go get your hair done or makeover. It's not in a shallow way. What I'm trying to say is that you have a soul. You came here with a purpose. You are an aspect of source or God or the universe or whatever you want to call it. You are a facet of that expressing itself here in this physical. Your soul wants to, it wants to express itself and be all that it can be. When you don't love yourself, you are denying that facet of God or the universe or source from expressing itself through you. And you don't have a right to do that. And it's when we deny that, that is what causes all our problems and eventually maybe physical symptoms and illness and so on. That's why it's so important to love yourself.
Oh my gosh, I want to cry hearing you say that. That is just everything. So everything. When you say that, you do not have the right to deny source's expression through you. What would you say to the people that are listening to this that say, when I try and be myself and I try and express myself, and I know this to be true, what you're saying I know to be true, but my family blocks me, people reject me, I'm judged. How can being that fullness of myself come with all of that? What would you say to that?
So I would say, first of all, communication. Communicate with your family that you are not happy with where you are, because here's why it's super important. And why I say love yourself like your life depends on it is because I got cancer. I died. I died because I didn't love myself. So if you continue to use your family and so on as a reason for you to keep suppressing who you are and not fulfilling the purpose your soul came here to be, you will get wake-up calls. You don't want that. I share what I share because of what I went through. I don't want other people to go through that. So number one is communication with your family. If you are surrounded by people who truly love and value you, they will want you to be everything that you can be. They are probably only being the way they are, depending on you, because you have given them the impression that you're happy to serve them and to be there for them 24/7. They give them the opportunity to rise up and meet you where you want to be. You're denying them that opportunity, and you are assuming that they are not going to love you anymore. That's not saying a lot for them. Give them more credit. So that's number one. Communicate with them and give them that opportunity to rise up to support you with where you want to go. The second thing is, if there are people who are going to resent you for you being who you are, then it means they don't love you. It means that they have their own agenda. And so then you have to work something out depending on how much they mean to you and so on. But I did lose a couple of people who were friends. They were not related to me, they were not family, but I realized that they did have their own agenda and they needed me to be the way I was before, but I couldn't be that way anymore. So you do risk losing a few people. But here's the thing that you have to ask yourself. Very often, the minute we risk losing people, we go back to being the person we used to be. But in my case, if that person I used to be was that person who was the doormat, which is why I attracted them, and that doormat suppressed herself so much that she got cancer, I don't want to go back to being that person. So you really have to ask yourself that if that person only loves me when I'm being a doormat to them, then that's not love. That is not unconditional love. They do not love me. They love the doormat, who I am not. And there's an agenda. It's because I'm serving them. So you have to be willing to let go of relationships like that, because it's not you that's walking away. You are just being yourself, and you're giving them the opportunity to either rise up to where you are or to let go and let you continue to grow. The other thing is you have to realize that you are not being selfish in being who you are. So here's where people get confused, especially if you are someone who's super sensitive and you're an empath. We tend to think that we're being selfish when being ourself hurts another. No, it's not. If being yourself causes another to suppress you, they are the one that's being selfish. You are only selfish when you are trying to control other people. When you have no interest in being controlled, but you also don't want other people to control you, that is self-love. That's not selfish. When you want to control other people to serve you, that is selfish. And you're not doing that. You just want to be you. You don't want other people to control you, and you don't want to control other people. That is self-love.
Love. And so much courage to recognize that, right? And to step out. I quite often hear people say, but if I let go of these friends, then I will have no friends and I will be alone. And it's like sometimes we have to, I think, have the courage to step into the space of being who we are, knowing that the vacuum will be filled with new connections or relationships that maybe are more aligned with where we are at, and not being afraid to let go. There's sadness involved. I think I think we're allowed to be sad if we change and people don't come with us and are not supportive. And I've had to leave people behind as well for the same reason, just not getting the vibe of who I am now that I have broken free. Yes. But new people do come into the space. I think it's about the courage to do that, right?
Yes, and there is sadness. I felt a lot of sadness when I felt that I was changing and I was growing, and not everybody was able to meet me where I'm at, but I couldn't go back to being the person I used to be. And there is a lot of sadness, and there is some trepidation and fear, and am I going to be lonely? And I was alone for a while. But what then happens is you open the space up for people who are at where you're at. And that's the thing. And for me, I've realized it's an ongoing journey. It's really an ongoing journey. At different phases in my life, I'm still allowing myself to grow, and I'm still attracting new people, always who meet me where I'm at in that moment. And so it's an interesting process.
So good, so good. So can you tell me, I'm really practical, so I love to take like the spiritual conversations and be like, okay, what would like the most either skeptical or challenged people in my community say to me if I quoted some kind of idea to them? And with regards to embodying love in a fear-based world, like I can see it, and I think most people can see it, the soup we are swimming in is a fear-based culture. How do we embody that in the world in our daily lives? Like practically, I would say most people understand what that means, like in theory, but how do we be it when, for example, you're feeling fear inside yourself about society, about health, about your money situation, about anything? And not only that, but everyone around you is saying fearful things all the time, like they're parroting back things they've heard, and they're just absorbing all the fear messaging, and then they're telling it to you, and it's triggering your own fear. What's your couple of best tips, or one tip for people how to embody love in that moment so you don't get sucked into that vortex?
So this is something we're facing, I know, all the time. I deal with it all the time myself. And one of the things that I do is that I have to cut myself off from everything for a while. I tell people to actually, anybody who's feeling that fear and it's really affecting them, I always say that you actually need to go on an information fast or an information detox. You really do. You need to cut out the outside world for half a day, a full day if you can. No social media, no news, and if you can, no people who are parroting all these things back to you. I try not to watch the news. I watch the news maybe once a week just to stay on top of what's going on. But I don't do the whole daily, all day, I mean, I know people who have the news going on in the background all the time, all day, every day. I can't do that. I watch it literally once a week for about 30 minutes and then I'm done. But the thing that I tell people who it's really getting to them, unfortunately, I don't know of any quick fix where if you're in fear in that moment that you can just clear it all, except to just keep still and breathe. Just focus on your breath. That's one thing. If you're just feeling it in that moment, just focus on your breath and just breathe deeply. But so what I'm getting at is if you have a tendency of feeling this fear continuously, day in and day out, what it means is that your mind, your body, your soul needs an information detox. And this is really important, and I want to speak a little bit more about this. We are connected. We are connected to Source. We are connected to the universe. We are all connected. When I had my near-death experience, I realized that at our consciousness level, without our physical bodies, we are all connected. What I learned was that as a physical being, I had forgotten that connection. I had lost that connection. And the reason that my life was such a mess and why I was always so fearful and why I had got sick and why I was a doormat was because I was getting all my information from the physical world. And when we get all our information from the physical world, we're constantly reacting to it. And when all this information is fear-based, like whether it's to do with the current situation, the pandemic, or whether it's even when we're at school about you're not and fighting feelings of not being good enough, and everything we do comes from a place of fear, a fear of not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough. And now it's a fear of our health because of all this stuff that's happening, a fear of the government, what's the government going to do, and fear of not having enough money. It's always we're being bombarded with fear-based messages. And so what happens is our lives are being shaped by fear, whereas our lives are supposed to be shaped by love, not fear. And that's what I discovered when I was on the other side, was that had I never forgotten my connection to Source, to my soul, to my higher self, to my spirit's purpose, I would have realized that my purpose is to always follow what I resonate with, always follow what I love, always follow what brings me joy, what makes me feel whole or fulfilled. And if I was always following that, instead of constantly reacting to the fear messages coming from here, my life would have gone in a completely different direction. This applies to all of us. Today, so many people's lives are messed up because they're not connected with their true self, their spirit, their source, but they're more connected with the fear-based messages that are coming from the world, which are causing them to become rattled and living fear-based lives. What happens when you live in fear, you operate from what I call your lower chakras, you come from a place of survival, fight or flight. When you're in that survival mode, you're very much operating, and if you know the chakra system, you're very much operating from your base chakras, and you kind of lose touch with the higher chakras. And like the crown chakra is the one that's connected to the all that is. And so what happens is you completely lose touch with your purpose, your sense of self. You completely lose touch with trusting in the universe. And when we listen to the news, and when we listen about the pandemic, and when we're listening to this and we're all operating from fear, we completely lose touch with that. And we start to become more competitive with everyone, and we become angrier and more aggressive. And that's what you're finding is happening on social media right now. So what I like to tell everybody, just stop, just stop everything. Stop listening to social media, stop listening to other people's messages, stop getting angry at those who are angry. Just stop and be the one that just stops it. And then just breathe and turn inward and take a break. When we just stop taking all that information in, and we take a break from it, we're creating the space for that information from up there to come to us. We get insights. The more breaks you can take from the world, from social media, from the news, from fear-based messages, the more that your higher self and source can communicate with you. And the more you love yourself, the more you will allow yourself to do that, and the more you will trust those messages. When you don't love yourself, you tend to put what other people are saying as a higher priority to the messages you are getting yourself. That's another reason why self-love is so important for our survival. The more you love yourself, the more you actually allow spirit to speak to you, and the more you trust the insights that you're getting.
The more you trust it, right? Because it's the external world is so convincing.
It is.
It's so
it is very convincing.
Even in all its fear-basedness, it's very convincing. And you're right, it's a trusting, because even people that maybe are not into meditation or doing a lot of stillness practices, when you ask them, do you have a sense about it? Do you have a gut instinct about it? People are like, yeah, but... And it's sort of like a mistrust of that. I think you're right. The more you're cultivating that allowing of yourself and that practice of self-love, the more likely you are to give kudos and credence to those messages that you hear, the voices, which are not necessarily voices, but the sense that you get of what might be right for you. Or, for example, in a situation where if the world is chaotic, and you're seeing all these messages coming at you, and it's very convincing from politicians and from your neighbors and from your parents and everybody, if that contradicts what you know inside, the more you pull back from that a little bit and you trust your inner voice, you start to realize you have your own answers, and actually you might be your own authority. You and Source might be a higher authority in your own life than Channel YZ News.
Exactly. And it is really what it is. It's about being an authority of your own life. It's not about going out and telling everyone, hey, this is what you need to do with your life, and you're selfish if you don't do it. And because the minute that people say that to me, I turn off. I turn off from listening when people say, anybody who doesn't do it this way is selfish, or everybody has to do this. This is the way. If you don't listen, then you're part of the problem, and so on. I always tune into myself, and I don't have the authority to tell other people what to do. This is why even when doing interviews, I always say, this is what I do. And I'm not asking you to believe in me, I'm asking you to believe in yourself. Yes. And so my message is always, always, always about you tuning into yourself. Don't even give me power. I'm telling you, don't give anybody power. Take it back for yourself. That's always been my message from day one. And so when people try to convince me of things, since my near-death experience, it actually repels me. Because prior to that, I used to buy into everything, and I got lost. I got lost in the world of everyone else. And I know that the key is to take our own autonomy back, because our soul is super powerful. It is really powerful. And the more you love yourself, the more you trust that soul and that connection.
I really love that about your work and your books. In both your books, well, I know you've got many books, but the two I'm referring to are Dying to Be Me and your brand new book, which is Sensitive is the New Strong.
Sensitive is the new strong.
Yes.
That's it.
We'll talk about those in a little minute. But it's very clear in your messages. You're not saying all people who get sick because of this, and all people who XYZ. You're just saying this is my experience, and this was my absolute truth when I went and had my NDE. And what I learned from that is this: take from that what you will and apply it to your own life. And it's like, that is very clear that you're not trying to convince anyone of anything, nor say that everybody's situation is the same. But there is a foundational, underlying, powerful truth there, right? And I think everyone who has the courage to read the book and have a look at their own life will see it in there. What you're talking about right there about not trying to convince other people of a viewpoint, I just want to talk about something that's from one of your books, because this really stood out for me. And it's this idea of everybody has strongly held ideologies and beliefs, right? And so we swim in the soup of the conditioning we grow up in, our culture, our parents, our education system, the news media basically trains us to have our belief systems and ideas. And then we become divisive and separate from everyone who doesn't agree with that. And now we've got this non-unification, right? The fear-based world, not love. Your book, yes. There's a quote. Can I just read it? I think it's from Dying to Be Me.
Of course.
And I just love this, and we could maybe have a little conversation about it. You said in that book, since my NDE, I've learned that strongly held ideologies actually work against me. Needing to operate out of concrete beliefs limits my experiences because it keeps me within the realm of only what I know, and my knowledge is limited. And if I restrict myself to only what I'm able to conceive, I'm holding back my potential and what I can allow into my life. However, if I can accept my understanding as incomplete, and if I'm able to be comfortable with uncertainty, it opens me up to the realm of infinite possibilities. Yes. But that's not how most of us are living. Like, I'm quite a conscious person, and I attempt to stay really self-aware and conscious in my daily life. But I can have moments where somebody's belief system will trigger mine, and it rears up, and you have to really stop yourself before you let it take you over. So I think, can you just talk a little bit about that? Because this is what's happening in divisiveness, right?
It's totally what's happening right now. And we are so divided right now. And one of the reasons we're really divided is because people have very, very strongly held beliefs. I don't know what it's like in New Zealand right now, but where I am here in America, you have the extreme left and the extreme right. And it almost feels like the people at the extremes are never going to meet. They are. And what has been very sad for me to see is that even in the genre in which I operate in, with other authors, teachers, speakers, even within this genre, there are teachers and speakers that fall into both camps. And it's this whole thing where you have the, you've got the people who are the pro-vaxxers, who are saying that we all have to get vaccinated, and you have the people who are saying that that the vaccine is an experimental drug and don't be a guinea pig. And the thing is that for me, the bigger issue is not whether or not to get vaccinated, but it's the fact that the people are not talking to each other. They are angry with each other. They are judging each other. Each side is accusing the other side of being selfish and being part of the problem. And they can't even have a conversation. The two sides, when you see them, I'm seeing them even, as I said, within my genre, they're calling names, they're calling each other names and refusing to associate with each other. And it's very sad for me to see, because I see that divisiveness as being the bigger problem. And so if they didn't hold on to their views so dogmatically. And so I'm going from the perspective of my near-death experience, which I've started to call, a view from the other side. When I view it from the other side, from the perspective of the NDE, everybody's going to die anyway. Our bodies are extremely powerful anyway. They really are more powerful than we have been led to believe. It's all this fear that we've been fed about. Your body needs intervention for every little thing. If you had been conditioned to believe how powerful your body is, if you'd been conditioned to believe that our emotions, when we lose our will to live, that's when our cells start to die. So we really have to look at our emotions. If you learned things differently, you would feel differently about your body. But we have been ingrained to believe that our bodies are so vulnerable and that we are victims of disease. And so we have this fear of illness and so on. And so you have a lot of people who are fearing illness and everything. So, but from this death state, the most important thing is love. It really is. Love for self, realizing that we're connected to all. When you love yourself, what happens is the more you love yourself, the more you are, the more you love yourself, the more life force energy you have coursing through you. Let me put it that way. If you can imagine that, because, so I'm sorry this is going off on a long tangent. I don't know a short way of elaborating on that, on the statement that you made. So like what I realized when I was on the other side is that, for me anyway, I realized that every cell in my body cries to be loved. Every cell in my body. And what does that mean? We think of love here like we say, oh, I love my new iPhone, or I love this, or I love that. But it's not, love is not a strong enough word. Love is something so much deeper. And love is something that just enlightens you. So every cell in your body wants to be exposed to the light. Every cell in your body wants to be seen. It wants to be heard. It wants to be loved. And it was that realization. That's what self-love is. So it's like when you can bathe every cell in your body with love, that's when healing really enters your body. You're actually healing every cell when it is bathed with love and when it is bathed with light. It's like you're allowing life force energy to flow through it. And when you do that, your own energy is uplifted. Your own energy, you kind of like what they call frequency. You operate from a higher frequency. When you're operating from that higher frequency, you then impact the people around you who are within your energy space without you even saying anything. They're kind of like, oh, I don't know why, I'm feeling uplifted. I wonder why. They're absorbing your energy and they're feeling uplifted by you. But when you are in this space of being dogmatic and everybody is selfish, who doesn't do this, and when you're in anger, immediately your energy levels are constricted. Your cells become tight. Your muscles become tight. And your body becomes constricted because you're holding on to dogmatic positions and beliefs. And those beliefs are more important to you than your well-being or loving other people or seeing from a different perspective. From the perspective I was at, from that perspective, I realized that everybody's individual beliefs is what shaped their own life. If I believe the vaccine is amazing and it's going to help me, it will be. If I believe the vaccine is toxic and that it's going to make my body seize up, it probably will. We've heard of the placebo and the nocebo. So if I believe that all those people are toxic, to me, they will be. From that perspective, all beliefs are true for the people who hold those beliefs. from the view from the other side, from the death realm. And so if you're open, you're like, okay, let me see what beliefs work for me. Let me see what beliefs are good for my body. Let me see what helps me navigate the world, instead of taking views and holding on to them and clenching your fists. So that's kind of what I mean.
Beautiful. That makes complete sense. I'm a huge advocate for belief review and selection and retraining our minds out of those conditioned beliefs. And I think for anyone who is interested in those things that you just said, if you believe the impact will be positive, yes. If not, and you think it's going to be negative, yes. Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, right? Biology of Belief, genius book.
And yes, genius book. Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, You Are the Placebo, all of these scientists. I'm not a scientist, but I had that physical experience. And these guys, and for me, when I first came back and started talking about it, I was being debunked by skeptics and all, until I met Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, and they were like, oh, you're living proof of what we talk about. And I was like, these are the kinds of scientists I want to know.
Yeah, beautiful. And such important work. And you know, when you're talking about letting yourself be bathed in love and the cells of your body to be bathed in love, two things came to mind. Is I think for me, the easiest way to do that is to go into a meditation with visualization, where you literally imagine. So people could maybe do that. And it also reminded me of a quote I read a long time ago. I think it was a Saint Teresa of Avila quote, where someone asked her, what do you do in prayer, or what do you do in meditation? And her response was something to the effect of, I just allow myself to be loved. And I love that. I just like this idea of, I'm just going to go meditate to let myself be loved. It's like so glorious, right? So I think that's and going back to what you said before, turning inward. You know, like taking an information detox and turning inward and using visualizations and meditations and things like that is not just like let me try to calm down a little bit. This is like very powerful work that's happening when we do these things, right? It's very powerful energy. And with this divisiveness, I love that really your response to that was, in response to divisiveness and issues, sit yourself, bathe yourself in love and lift your vibration. Because I assume when you get into that space, you are less likely to be divisive yourself or be reactive to other people's divisiveness. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And so very often when people ask me my views on things to do with the recent pandemic and everything, I always say that my view is that we really need to come together. We need to come together. We need to be able to talk to each other. Because the divisiveness right now is the bigger disease. It really is. Looking at it from the other realm, because the way the world was going, even before the pandemic, we couldn't keep going the way we were going. When you think about it, even governments of all the nations, they were spending more money on developing weapons to kill each other instead of trying to feed each other. That's the direction this world was going. We were, it was almost like we were going to be at the brink of our own extinction. And then this pandemic happened and it stopped everyone at its tracks. It stopped the world. It stopped everything. And it's given us a chance to reset and rethink. And now this is our opportunity. And I truly believe this is a time, because I don't know of anything that's ever happened in our history that has brought the entire planet to its knees the way this has. I feel it's a divine intervention and not, I feel it's something bigger than what we think. And I think we're crazy to think that we as humans can just keep trying to fight with each other and fight it. I think we really need to rethink as a planet what our values are.
Which is the perfect segue to this. My next juicy question is, I watched a video you did last year, mid-2020, and you talked about, will the challenges of humanity break us apart or bring us together? And they could be challenges of numerous types, right? Obviously, there's global health issues, there's injustices, there's racism, there's social inequality, there's war, there's all sorts of things. And you sort of talked around that we're being called to a new type of spirituality, a new paradigm needs to emerge from this. And what I wanted to ask you is, what do you sense is possible, and where do you think we as individual beings are being called to in our own paths in order to enact and enable something to be different? Because it looks like and feels like for most individuals, that's a nice idea, but
Yeah.
right. So, you said something to the effect of the way things have been, it wasn't working, and it was actually a pressure cooker building for years, and it was just waiting to explode into something. And so this has not come out of the blue. It's just been this underlying, bubbling, boiling thing. And so what do you sense is possible as a new paradigm, as a new brand or mode of spirituality and being in the world?
So, me personally, what I would love to see happening is I would love to see more what I call empaths. Empaths being the people who are empaths and highly sensitive people who traditionally have hid in the background of this world, who traditionally have been manipulated, who traditionally have felt that they are the weak people in this world, the woo-woo, the crazies. Traditionally, we've always been treated that way and felt that way about ourselves. I would love to see us all coming forward and using our voice and taking back and reclaiming our own autonomy and our power and saying, look, we're fed up of the way the world is. And I would like for people like empaths like you and other empaths and sensitive people to start stepping up and stepping into positions of leadership and power. Because traditionally, I can't think of any truly successful empaths out there leading the way or trailblazing for us. Most of the people who are in leadership positions are not. They're not particularly compassionate or empathic. They're mostly hungry for power, and for power's sake. And what happens, and I believe the reason for this is because as a culture, we tend to worship, or we tend to define the word strength and brave. We tend to define that or worship that and define it, or the metrics to define strength has traditionally been things like competitiveness, ruthlessness, people who make it to the top at any cost, and even people who are super wealthy, who are powerful. We tend to worship people like that, and we tend to define them as being strong and successful. Whereas when somebody is compassionate and empathic and sensitive and is feeling towards other people, we tend to say, oh, they're weak. And we tend to say, oh, boys don't cry. And oh, you've got to grow a thicker skin if you want to survive in this world. We undermine those things. So people who feel that way are marginalized, and they have to suppress those traits. And they have to change. They feel there's something wrong with them and they have to change. What I'm saying is defining strength in that way and weakness in that way is what is the problem with the world. That's what has caused our problems. If we change them, and if we continue the way we've been going, we will be at the brink of our own extinction. Because if we continue to worship people who are power hungry and who are competitive and who are ruthless, if we continue to worship them and vote them in as our leaders and help them to take on leadership roles, the world is never going to be compassionate or empathic or any of those things. We need to support the more empathic among us. But not only that, because the world has felt so ruthless and harsh, people who are sensitive feel they can't handle such a world, and so they hide. Yep. They hide under a rock. I want to advocate giving them a voice. Yeah. That's what I want to do.
Yes, and this beautiful book, which at the moment, I'm about 70% through, loving it. You've got it there. And
I've got it here, thank you.
I love this subline, the power of empaths in an increasingly harsh world. Yes, people, it is an increasingly harsh world. And shrinking away is not going to solve the problem, right? So
no.
this call to action from you. You're a leader, you're an incredibly strong, highly sensitive, empathic, beautiful, powerful, empowered female leader in the world, and you're putting a call to action for people. And I think you're really calling in this book, calling out the challenges that people face when they're highly sensitive. And it is no wonder people want to run away and hide when you think about the power structures, the power over whoever talks loudest, is willing to fight more for whatever it is they want, ends up winning. And most people that are highly sensitive and empathic and are very feeling oriented and compassionate are like, I can't play this game.
Exactly. And so we can't play this game, and we end up living in a world that has been created and dominated and dictated by the harsher voices and the more aggressive voices. And we kind of go, this is not the world I would have created if it was up to me. So that's why I put a call out. So basically, there's two elements. One is to teach them that you can create your own world. You don't have to be part of that world. You don't have to buy into that. But the more of us that create our own world, we can actually come together and change the world for everybody.
Got it. And it's interesting because when somebody would pose the question to me, what does the world need more of? I would say compassionate listening. I think about how, I think it's, I'm going to pronounce his name terribly, I'm sure, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh, yes.
Had an interview with Oprah once and talking about compassionate listening and listening to understand and listening from the position of, I hear, brother or sister, I hear your pain. I understand that you must be in such suffering for this to be spilling over onto other people. So what does the world need? Compassionate listening. People that are intuitively connected to source, that are downloading information about where can we go with technology, health, our money system, our education system, our whatever, like the practical realities. Who is downloading that information? People that are intuitively connected. I mean, we're all intuitively connected, but people that are really sensitive to that and aware of it. What does it need? It needs more of these kind of people, right? The feeling.
Yes. What we need to value people's feelings more within corporate. But what we really need is more empathic people in leadership positions, in government, as corporate heads. That's what's lacking. That's what's really lacking, because we're always told that, if you're too sensitive, you can't handle it. And so the thing is, what I have tried to also explain in the book is that empaths and sensitive people really struggle with making money. And so I talk about how we can improve on that, because I think that it would be great if empaths and sensitive people learned how to make money and became okay with making money, because you want empathic people to have money flow to them, because what are they going to do? They're going to use it to make the world a better place. So we want to support our empaths. We want them to make more money. But empaths gravitate towards work that is sensitive. Even if they're in a IT company, they're much more intuitive. They're much more into what's going to make people's lives better, and they're more in touch with messages they're getting from the other side on what to develop next. They're very intuitive. Whether they are artists, whether they are healers, whether they are teachers, empaths and sensitive people are very, very connected. They're driven by the idea and the ideology of making lives better. That's what makes empaths. That is what drives them, is making the lives of other people better. So I want empaths to make money because they will use it to make people's lives better. However, because empaths are driven to serve people and make people's lives better, very often they're terrible at receiving. And so they're very good at giving and helping and serving, but terrible at receiving, which is why they end up never making what they deserve. And so I really ask them to look at that in this book and give them exercises to really review that and learn to receive with the knowledge that they can do so much more.
The feeling I get from your book, from what I've read so far, is that while there are a lot of people doing work around supporting empaths, supporting highly sensitive people, supporting people that are really feeling oriented in this difficult world, sometimes it feels a little bit like, how do we take these gifts which are currently feeling like burdens, and how do we let you walk through the world in a way that it's not going to ruin you, and like let you function and enjoy your life? This is like really a like stand up, be strong, you are strong, you know, like it's a very, like you said, advocating for it. Feels like a hand reaching and pulling people up when I read it, which is a little bit different to the wrapping an arm around and helping to walk through challenges. It really does feel like a rising up book. So that's a really exciting thing that I highly recommend people read. I'll make sure that with this video there's a link to the new book and your other books as well, but the new book is a really wonderful, refreshing, and I think important message at this point we're at on the planet right now.
Thank you.
What do you think will actually help people come together at this point and realize that we're all from one source? And what do you think the biggest messages are, or the one thing that people can hold on to in themselves, or the one thing people can say to other people when they're faced with, for example, you should do this for your health because that's the right thing to do, or you shouldn't do that because of this, or you shouldn't, whatever it is, in any area of your life, whether it's health or money or social systems or whatever, to help yourself remember that, and to help maybe offer one thing we could say to other people when they are trying to bring their ideology at you, where you want to not divide, you want to unify. What might be one thing we could hold on to and remember?
So the first thing is to always ask ourselves, when we're in a conversation with someone, ask ourselves that what can I say that will unify us and not divide us further? Because you know, and very often we may be trying to unify, but that person is saying things that the other person is saying things that are very divisive. But what I always do is I always try to unify as opposed to divide. And so just be aware that we're trying to kind of come together and not trying to divide. And then the second thing is that they are entitled to their view, but I am entitled to mine. So always remember that yourself. They are entitled to theirs and I am entitled to mine. So as long as you are sure inside that you're not trying to convince them of your view, then you can, because sometimes we think it's them, but it could be us trying to convince them of our view. So the question is always even ask myself, am I trying to convince them of my view? So then I would just literally just say, if I am in that kind of dialogue where it feels like we're locking horns, I will actually say that, you know, I absolutely respect your view, and I know that it feels really good for you to do that. And for me, it feels really good to do blah, blah, blah. And shall we just agree at that?
Agree to disagree. And I think that's it, isn't it? We can't expect that we're going to all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and love each other and have the same viewpoint. But we can metaphorically hold hands and say, I hear you and I understand how that must be for you, and I understand your viewpoint and you're entitled to your viewpoint and I respect that viewpoint and that's not my viewpoint, and let's agree to disagree, and I love the soul you are. But we are very hard on our viewpoints about things.
Yes. And I actually have people around me within my own team who I am very close to, who have different viewpoints from each other, different viewpoints from me, but we love each other and still work as a team. And we're loyal to each other. And so, you know, and I think, and the thing is, because the thing that I insist on for anybody who's going to be part of my team, I don't insist on it like as a global thing. People can believe what they want, but in the same way, I have the authority or the autonomy to say that, oh, this is what I want from people who are going to be part of my team. And what I want is people who can accept others who have views that are different from theirs and still love them and work together with them. And we recognize each other for the talents and skills we have. And we're all loyal towards each other. As long as we can agree on those things, we're good.
Beautiful. And that's just a great example of an approach you can take that is unifying and is not trying to get everyone on the same page. You're not trying to get people to change anything. You're just allowing people, just allow people to be and allow yourself to be. And I think there is a fine line, I do know, where if I just allow XYZ to exist in the world, it is trying to swamp and bring people down and cause problems. So I always think it's important to say it doesn't mean don't advocate and be an activist for important issues. But I really loved how you said before, if you are in a space where you're talking to someone and they're trying to put their view on you and you're like, I hear you, but check yourself, right? We have to check ourselves and say, yeah, but am I inside going, they're just not understanding me. They just don't get it. I need to convince them. So I think you've offered so many gems of little ideas that we can use, things that we can remember when we're in conversation with people, that maybe there's fear-based energy, maybe there's people trying to put their beliefs and ideologies on us, whatever it might be. You've given some really insightful things that we can embody and practice. And what I love about it is that it's come from you and from the other side through you, through this experience you've had, which, may I say, your NDEs have been a blessing to the world.
Oh, thank you.
Right? I mean, your work has touched millions and millions of people. And I often wonder, do you wonder, I had this NDE and this happened to me, and it has birthed into the world this huge tidal wave of loving energy and messages that I have no doubt has healed people.
I do it. Sometimes I can't believe it myself. I can't believe it, especially because when I first came back from the near-death experience, at first I wanted to shout it from the rooftops, and then I saw the pushback from people, from the critics and the skeptics, and I was like, whoa, okay, it's not going to be well received. And then going through the struggles, it's blown me away how just saying, okay, this is my story, and it's just what happened to me, and how it has done what it's done. In a way, at that time, what I felt I was doing was I was setting the story free when I put it on the internet, and I thought, I'll let it go where it needs to go. I set it free, and it still blows me away as to what has transpired on my journey. It really does.
And divine intervention had it land on Dr. Wayne Dyer's plate.
Exactly. That was huge. I mean, once it landed on his plate, it went on a whole other trajectory. It was incredible.
And I think what's helped your message to be set free and have a life of its own is you have such grace in how you bring it into the world. And it's just a real pleasure to be with. It doesn't feel like you're trying to convince anyone of anything. It just feels like a portal opening up to see something from a different perspective in a really loving way. So thank you very much for being here with us. This has been a complete treasure and a treat for me personally, and I know for everyone in our community as well.
Oh, thank you. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, Bernadette. Wonderful questions. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And before we go, can you just tell me how people can get in touch with you? Really importantly, I'll put links to your books. Your new book has only been out for a month or so, and it's wonderful. So I'll make sure that people get that. How else can they get in touch with you or learn from you?
So my website is anitamoorjani.com. That's ANITAMOORJANI.com. And I have a lot of information on my website. I have a ton of videos on YouTube. So I do have a YouTube channel, which is, I believe, called Anita Moorjani, or YouTube/Anita Moorjani. I am on Instagram, Facebook. I do have a membership platform. We have, at this moment, paused taking members just because we are adding a few little extra things to it, but it will reopen in about a month or so. Members will reopen, and the membership platform, I call it the Sanctuary, and it is anitamoorjanisanctuary.com. People can check in there for when it reopens. It is a place of support for empaths, for people who find the world too harsh. And in that platform, it's a membership platform where I offer courses and videos to help empaths to reclaim their own power and to kind of be to be all they are, and to be able to go out in the world, and if they wish to kind of take on leadership roles. But basically it's just courses to help empaths to reclaim their own power.
I love the name of that, Sanctuary. That sounds like a place I want to be. Delightful. Okay, well, I'll make sure there's links to all of that and people can follow through and connect in with your work, and definitely read your books if they haven't already. Thank you so much, Anita.
Thank you, Bernadette. That was such a pleasure.